Hey everyone. All right, today we're going to do a Gimme 10. This is a thing that has been around for a while in the vinyl community. Started long before I ever started making videos 5 or 6 years ago. As far as I've always known, Fred at Big Star 1000 was really the one that kind of started these Gimme 10s. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I've always been under the impression of. I've seen all of Fred's Gimme 10s pretty much, and they're all fantastic. Today I'm going to do one, and I'm going to do Gimme 10 2000s indie folk. How did I get here? Well, I've been working in the background on my favorite alt country albums of all time kind of like list, and it's going to be a pretty big list. I don't know how many yet, but it'll be multiple videos. But anyway, there's some albums that I would come across, or artists I would come across and be like, is that really alt country? Is it kind of like indie folk? And I'll kind of mention who else. But it just kind of made me think of a bunch of other albums, and I thought it'd be a fun little Gimme 10, a nice kind of like nostalgic kind of thing for me to look back on. The years of my mid to late 20s. All right, the first album we're going to talk about is 2006's Roots and Crowns by Califone, the Chicago band, basically the project of Tim Rutilli. That's how I've always said his name. I don't even know if that's the right way to say it, but this was the project that he started after his previous band, Red Red Meat. Now, are they an indie folk band? There's more like elements of it, right? Because there's all kinds of experimental stuff kind of happening in here. There's some West African type rhythms that are like mixed into the compositions. But there's really a lot of avant folk, a lot of kind of weird folk, psych folk. So that's kind of why I'm throwing it in here. But it's a brilliant album with all kinds of textures, almost unclassifiable in a way. I'm not a huge Califone head. My buddy Dom at Singing a Thread, I believe, is. I'm more kind of cherry picked some of their albums, but this is the one that really got me into them at all, and definitely one of my favorites from around that time. Okay, the next one I'm going to talk about is 2009's Gather, Form, and Fly by Megaphon. Megaphon was formed in the Triangle area of North Carolina. This is basically the three guys that were left over from the group De-Armand Edison: Phil Cook, Brad Cook, Phil Westerland, and the fourth member was Justin Vernon of Bon Iver. They were all from Wisconsin. Justin Vernon left North Carolina and went back to Wisconsin, and these guys stayed around in North Carolina, formed this group, and have become huge members of the North Carolina music scene, the Triangle music scene in the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area. But yeah, this is a very much kind of similar type of thing to Califone in a way, but I think definitely more traditional folk, but there's all kinds of avant kind of sounds in here, psych kind of mixed in. They also have a lot in common with Akron Family, I would say, for those of you that are aware of them. Great album. And this is a band that I've considered doing an entire video on, and I still might, because the Cook brothers have done all kinds of stuff. All three of them have done all kinds of stuff since Megaphon, but they only put out like a few releases. Highly recommend 2009's Gather, Form, and Fly. Here's one that a lot of people will be familiar with from 2006, Joanna Newsom's Ease. Joanna Newsom, harp player, incredibly unique voice, an absolute talent, incredible songwriter and composer. This is an absolutely epic record of only 5 songs. Absolutely beautiful music with excellent storytelling, and definitely a folk album, right? She was like an indie artist, right? And this is on Drag City. In my opinion, has never released a bad album. The next one I'm going to talk about is 2003's You Are Free by Cat Power. Now, is this an indie folk record? Not exactly. Are there indie folk tunes on here? For sure. But why am I bringing this one up? She really paved a lane for a lot of the artists that are kind of considered indie folk artists today, right? Specifically, people like Angel Olsen, Sharon Van Etten, Adrienne Linker. I mean, none of them would have a career, in my opinion, if it wasn't for Cat Power. You know, The Greatest would have been a good one to bring up as well. Or, you know, even Moonpix. Yeah, this is one that seems to kind of be forgotten about every once in a while. So wanted to bring that one up. You Are Free by Cat Power, 2003. All right, the next one I want to talk about is 2006's The Trials of Van Occupanther by Midlake. There are definite indie folk vibes all through this. Now, Midlake is a band that has kind of changed a lot from album to album in their career. Their previous album, they're out of Denton, Texas. Their previous album was more just kind of like very emotional, kind of alternative rock. You would listen to that and you would say, this probably has more in common with Coldplay than it does like folk music or whatever. And you'd be right. This one completely goes in a different direction. They were definitely listening to Fleetwood Mac, specifically Christine McVie and Stevie Nicks, you know, tunes from Fleetwood Mac in the 70s. Also America, strong America vibes like throughout this record. But I will say that this is one of the better produced, better recorded albums. And I'm not talking about pressing, I'm not talking about any of that bullshit, guys, mastering or any of that. I'm talking about recorded in the studio, the craftsmanship that went into making the music that goes on this disc, that type of thing. This was a brilliantly recorded, brilliantly produced record, and I believe these guys slaved over it. I actually think it took a toll on the band. Of course, the lead song, Roscoe, is one of the best songs from the 2000s, but also Bandits and Head Home, and it covers the hillsides. It's just an absolutely gorgeous record by this Denton, Texas band. Okay, the next one I'm going to talk about is from 2009, and this is an Australian band, The Middle East. Indie folk, for sure. And this is really just kind of like an EP, 5 songs, and actually not the only EP I'm going to talk about here today. This was actually sent to me as, I should mention, as VCLT from my Australian brother, Dean. And yeah, I mean, I think most people know the song Blood on here. And I think a lot of people, when they hear the Middle East, in fact, I actually knew some people when they first heard that song, they thought it was just they thought it was another Bon Iver song. And there's definitely a similarity in sound there. The Middle East from Australia, it's from 2009, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, anyway. Okay, everybody knows these guys, Fleet Foxes. This is their debut full length from 2008. This was an album that I listened to all the time that year, like all the time. And for the next couple of years, I was obsessed with Fleet Foxes. Brilliant vocal melodies running throughout this music, expertly composed, incredible players. I mean, this is just the best. Definitely one of the best that came out that year, around that time, kind of like defined this whole kind of indie folk thing, really. Fleet Foxes from 2008. All right, this next one is a favorite of mine, a personal favorite. Absolutely love this album. Love the band too, but really this album, Vekatomist, I believe is how it's pronounced. It's how I've always pronounced it. I believe it's like a group of islands or something, like off the coast of the Northeast somewhere. Grizzly Bear. Absolutely brilliant band. This was their, third release, I believe. A lot of people love the one before it, 2006's Yellow House. That was the one that got me into them. This one they went to a whole nother level. And this is just an absolutely brilliant record from start to finish. Again, incredible vocal harmonies. Some of the best singing voices from around that time. Also, really great players, really good musicians. Just absolutely outstanding stuff. Southern Point, 2 Weeks was kind of like the big kind of like single off of this record. My favorite song was Ready Able, though. Ready Able is brilliant. Brilliant. Got to see these guys perform in Atlanta. Saw them one more time after that, where they were opening for the XX. But I got to see them as a headliner. Absolutely amazing. One of the better shows I've ever seen, really. It was on this tour. Yeah. All right, and these last two guys are two of kind of like the biggest names. Yeah, the first one is Sufjan Stevens. Now, obviously, a lot of people know Sufjan Stevens, and he does a lot more than just indie folk, right? But the reason I wanted to talk about this one is from 2004, Seven Swans. It's one that I feel like is at times kind of forgotten about. Of course, Illinois is the one that everybody raves about and is such a huge touchstone from that era. And then, you know, he put out Carrie and Lowell like 10 years later in 2015 and drew a lot of acclaim for that record as well, which is more of a folk record. Definitely a folk record. But this is also very much in the same vein as Carrie and Lowell. And it was one that it got its due for sure. And I knew a lot of people that were listening to this record, but it hasn't really stood the test of time as far as being talked about and the acclaim that I feel like it deserves. It's one of my personal favorites by him. And this is really the one that got us here, because this is the one I was considering the album Our Endless Number of Days for my alt country list. But I consider Iron and Wine, Sam Beam's project, to be more indie folk and definitely not alt country. To me, it's the whole kind of the same thing with Sufjan Stevens in this record. There's a strong Nick Drake vibe. So I could have pulled Our Endless Number of Days. I've talked about that album a lot. It's one of my all-time favorites. I actually will maybe talk about it. I probably will talk about it in another video coming up down the line. So I just wanted to pull out this one, Woman King, from 2005, and this is an EP, and it is brilliant. It's only 6 songs, but every time I listen to it, it leaves me wanting more. I wish that I don't know how they weren't part of a full album, these songs. They're all so great. None of them are throwaways. A lot of times you consider an EP to have some songs that were just kind of didn't fit on an album necessarily, or were kind of throwaways or whatever, or maybe they're a transitional record, right? From one sound to another sound on another album, and there's like the stuff that kind of happened in between. Sometimes that's what an EP is. This isn't the case with this record. It's just a great EP. This was the height of his creativity, in my opinion. I think he's put out good music since then, don't get me wrong. Those mid-2000s years from Sam Beam and Iron and Wine, really the sweet spot. Yeah, so Woman King by Iron and Wine. And that's 10. That's 10 albums. Anybody else wants to do a response? I welcome it. There are plenty of people left that I didn't talk about, for sure. Hope everybody's doing well. And we'll see you next time. All right, bye.
Digital gramophone makes no sense.